Now, for the first call to action to be presented this afternoon is the Asia Higher Education Accessibility. Now, given the importance of education, this CTA aims to close the tertiary education financing gap and allow every student equal opportunities. And to start the session and share more details, I would like to call upon Tom Hall from UBS. Tom, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I want to keep it short, and I won't repeat everything that I said earlier, but just really to say that I think for us, it is genuinely about trying to create a world where every single person, particularly those affected by inequality in some of the poorest countries of the world, get access to the opportunities they need in life to live their lives to the full. And we know, and being a bank, you would expect us to say this, you need to take a portfolio approach to having impact on people's lives, right? We have to focus on healthcare. We have to focus on the fact that 1 million children are still dying in the first 24 hours of life. We need to focus on making sure the 5 million children who still die before the age of 5 are not dying anymore. 30 years ago, that was 10 million. So we're making progress. We can improve on things like healthcare. But just being healthy and surviving is not enough. To thrive, to fulfill your potential, you need to have access to a high-quality education. Right from the early years, as we'll hear in the second session, through to higher education, because we genuinely see higher education as this pipeline that can rapidly take people into employment, maybe into budding entrepreneurship, to fulfill their potential and add value to our communities and societies. And that is what this call to action is all about. And I mentioned today about the fact that there is an education crisis. This is a difficult problem. I think the Deputy Prime Minister almost didn't answer that question this morning when he was asked about, well, what can the government do? I thought he was going to quote JFK and say, well, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. But I'm going to quote JFK. He held back and say, we don't tackle these problems because they're easy. We tackle them because they're hard. And the only way we can solve them is together, working together, pooling resources, trying to find solutions that don't exist yet today, because the ones that we do have are subscale. And I mentioned this earlier, so I don't need to go into it again. And this is not to say, by the way, that those of us funding scholarships or maybe investing in student financing today are doing the wrong thing. That's not the case at all. That's the best we have. But the challenge for us is to come up with something better. Something that can be more scalable, something that can reach all the people who need it. And that is the challenge that I hope this call to action will help solve. And to dive into a little bit more detail in some of the innovative instruments that we want to try and invest in with this new Asia Higher Education Fund, I'm going to invite my colleague Dickson Lim to come and give some more colour. Over to you, Dickson.
Thank you, Tom. So what do we intend to do? Asia Higher Education Accessibility, this CTA, what we hope to do is to find solutions, financial solutions such as loans, income share agreement, which I'll elaborate in a moment, and any other financial instruments that can focus on the students' potential to thrive in the future instead of solely based on their present circumstances, their financial circumstances, their academic performance. We want to look at hopefully investable, if not at least the potential to be investable solutions so that we can ensure long-term sustainability, so that we can drive more capital, private capital especially, into the space in order to make it sustainable. So I'm going to give an example of an income share agreement, something that we have tried, and at least for those of us who might not be too familiar, a little bit more details for you to consider. This is how it works. It focuses on the student's potential to thrive. So it looks into the future. The investor commits upfront to fund the education, and then the student in turn, upon graduation, upon finding a job, to start repaying only when you achieve a certain level of agreed income. So how it works is this, starting from left, the student, and that's the key. We want to match the student's potential. That means assessment. That means looking at what is available, education that is fit, that is future-oriented in terms of the market and skills in demand. We want to match that with the relevant education and start the student off right. No collaterals will be looked at so that we ensure inclusivity. We maximize the ISA amount up to covering tuition fees and living expenses. And then the students study. But we don't leave the student alone to study. We want to continue to guide them, to mentor them, especially career guidance, because that's the outcome that we want to bring them to. So if we are successful when they graduate, hopefully they land on the employment that will maximize their potential, therefore they achieve the maximum outcome that they're capable of, and achieve the minimum career and income level that we all agree on in the agreement. Then the repayment starts. Should at any point in time, for whatever reason, the income level drops, we suspend payment, and that's the idea. Until all paid up, either the repayment cap meaning the duration or the number of payments, or the period is reached as agreed. And the repayment then, hopefully, is what is going to be recycled, and that's the whole idea of sustainability. We recycle that fund to the next person. So the student repaying back is not paying back to somebody's profit. It's paying back for the next person to be able to benefit from it. And the payment that we are expecting can be anything from 1x to 2.5x. So if on hearing that, you will understand this, that the student success is really the center of what everybody focuses on. So we want to align all the stakeholders that are involved, the investor, the ISA provider, the education provider. So for the ISA provider, the motivation is an in-depth understanding of the job market, the skills in demand. Share that data with the education provider, who will then make sure that they provide something that is future-oriented, market-oriented curriculum, offering the best value for the buck, right? If they do this very well, the outcome will be achieved. Ultimately, it benefits the investor, who will maximize his return. That's the model that we are looking at. So we have, Tom has already shared earlier about what we have piloted in Africa. And this is unique because we add a touch of a blended finance approach to that, where the philanthropic dollars is catalytic in raising private capital so that we can scale it even further. This is but one model that we have embarked on in Africa. There are many, many models out there, and that's what we are excited about. Specifically, we want to focus on Asia. So that's what we are launching today, the Asia Higher Education Fund. What we hope to do in the next few years with this fund is this. We want to identify the best solutions out there. We have already launched a fund that we have committed to. $1 million is out there. It closes next month. So those of us who are aware of very innovative ideas and solutions in the same space, that's the prize that we have left out there. We have committed $1 million for the best 4 ideas. $250,000 to fund those pilots that we have identified anywhere around the world. So it's a global search. But beyond that, we hope in phase 1 to embark on initiatives, on studies, on feasibilities, pilots, and then assessing their viability, hopefully to identify solutions beyond just income share agreements. That's one of the great ideas that we have, but we believe there are more. So hopefully identify some of these ideas and solutions, and then going into phase 2 to support this, to make sure that they are really good and qualitatively curated. So that's what we want to go into. And we are prepared even then to apply on some of this equity financing, debt, convertibles, and even grant funding if some of these agencies are not ready. So we want to give them some readiness to level them up. And hopefully at some point in time in phase 3, and that's what we are targeting, to scale this. To scale this, and the same model that we are looking at to hopefully bring in private capital to make sure that it gets us there. So one example right in Asia that we are evaluating that I thought would be a good for us to catch a glimpse of some of the solutions that are out there. This is ISA, but with a very innovative approach in Philippines. In Philippines, we are looking at the bottom of the pyramid. You will see the profile of the students that are being considered there. So 3 out of 5 Filipino households cannot afford higher education financing. This InvestEd has innovatively developed an algorithm that basically teaches these students about credit worthiness. There is a score, and it guides them, and this is largely through the interaction that they have. So it's not a give and forget, and later on I'm going to chase you for payment. This is to give you and guide you along and engage you, and in that sense, monitoring the credit worthiness so as to ensure repayment. They have given out 1.5 million, 3,000 loans, 90% repayment rates. That's what we are looking at. That's what we are excited about. This is one that hopefully, if our evaluation goes through, it will be one of the projects that we consider for Philippines, right here in Asia, and maybe perhaps beyond if they are ready to go. But there will be other players coming in. So just an example. My final slide, and that's a summary here. We are looking to raise $10 million for phase 1 to 3, and we are looking at Asia and Asia alone. We want something unique here and piloted here that perhaps has global potential. We want to look at the possibility and the potential to tailor some of these sub-funds. If there are some donors in this space that would like to tailor a little bit to perhaps a particular industry like tech or STEM, or you want to look at with a gender lens, or you want to look at a specific country, we are prepared to consider that. Come and talk to us. Hopefully, we not only identify, support, and scale, hopefully we incentivize you as well. So UBS is matching for every dollar given 20%. That's what we are committing to. And for those who are looking at Singapore, Singapore is one of the most generous countries in the world to give 250% tax deduction. So that applies too for whatever we're going to pilot here in Singapore. Okay? I'm going to pause here now. I'm going to hand the time to our partner. We have two partner foundations who has embarked on this journey along with us. Octava Foundation and, okay, the name is not here. I'm going to hand over to Raman, who is representing her Octava Foundation to present on another ISA model right here in Asia to add another flavor to ISA space. Raman.
And before I start with the presentation, I just wanted to say my dissonance is that I'm following two bankers and affluent speakers, and that I think was not equitable to be called in later than them. So, okay, investing in women. So what I wanted to share with you, of course, Tom and Dickson has gone into the details of what an income sharing agreement is, what the structure of an income sharing agreement would look like, and what's the framework of recycling the resources in an income sharing agreement. What I wanted to populate today for you is an example of an implementer organization who's prototyped it in Southeast Asia in a specific context of gender lens. So Sidhu is an organization that invests in women leadership and women education in general. Sorry, I need to start to tell myself to stand close to the podium. I'm representing Octava Foundation. We're a private grant maker. Essentially, the way we do grant making is really to be hands-on management support to our grantees and to social entrepreneurs that we work with. And in that context, we've been working with Sidhu for about 2 years already, and really being the thought partner to Sidhu as an organization beyond just enabling them with the resources. We are not alone in supporting Sidhu. I'm very thrilled that we are joined by the Algot Ingvaldsen Foundation. And Mette, I do apologize in advance for pronouncing it wrong, and I will do it twice again. Sidhu as an organization is essentially a leadership development program for young women. They invest in women as young as 17 years old who can sign up to be a mentee on their leadership mentorship program. Every year, the same young women can come back for another mentor for an 8 months of engagement year on year, as long as she wants, all the way till she's 35 to 40. So essentially, they commit to a woman's growth and their leadership potential year on year. And as you know, women go through different stages of, or not just women, every young person goes through different stages of their growth. So from when they're in school, they're choosing their career. When they're in a career, they're choosing how do they grow in that career. So they travel with them all across. These are just some data sets from Sidhu. As Sidhu started to do this, and they've been doing this women leadership for about 8 years in Southeast Asia, across very many countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia, they had a very nuanced need that their young women were coming back to them for. They all were hungry for growth. They all wanted to access education opportunities and continue with them. And some of them have issue around financing their education upfront. Some were finding funding gaps as they were going into their education and were at the risk of stopping midway. And you probably can't give them all the leadership and mentorship and not being able to get them into an employment or to be growing in the employment. So that's when the income sharing agreement piece came into play. So they started prototyping it. We're calling it phase 1. 100% of the funds raised were donation, and essentially what Sidhu wanted to do was to really understand how to manage a contract end to end. What would it take to give a contract of an income sharing agreement to a young woman? How would you select them? How would you service them? How would you keep them engaged in the social collateral of returning the resources when they get to a stage that they could give it back? We've understood already through Dickson how the process works. And I just wanted to share with you the current performance of the 64 contracts that have already been deployed. So of the 64 contracts, 172,000 has been deployed in contracts. They're across Southeast Asia and South Asia. As the money has started to come back, as the contribution has started to come back, about 149,000 was raised to be deployed. The rest of the resources is from the contribution. So Vidhu has been able to offer 15 extra contracts on the 49 contracts that were fully funded by donation. So that's your 1.26. The bankers in the room can correct that. So on an average, the contract size is about USD 2,700. They're seeing a contract duration of about 6 years. I mean, the numbers are small. 64 contracts doesn't give us the luxury of conclusively agreeing what the averages would look like. But these are the early numbers that are coming through it. The percentage of income shared ranges up to 9%, between 5 to maximum 10. And the average time from when the FISA, or the Future Income Sharing Agreement, was deployed by Vidhu to the time when it's starting to get contribution back from the young women is about 23 to 24 months. So that's kind of the recyclable amount of time that you could expect. What were the young women wanting to get funded for? So most of them, as you can see from this, was really bachelor's and master's degree. So these were university degrees, but they did have requests on certificates and diplomas and vocational trainings as well. What is the result looking like? Again, 64 contracts. You can't be very conclusive with that data set, but what we are really excited to share is that 100% completion rate on every young woman who's currently gone through the education through an income sharing agreement has completed her education, those that have got to that end. What else do we know? We are seeing, of course, I shared there were 15 extra contracts that have been funded out of the contributions. So we've done some data set collection from why women have valued the income sharing agreement that they got. So, of course, they valued the no collateral, no guarantor, no prepayment necessary upfront. They also valued that they could just focus on the degree and not to be worried about the funding gap. What they also valued is that the payment only starts when they get to the job. And as young women, you go through different cycles where you take hiatuses in your job and employability. You could be getting married, you could be in a maternal circumstance, you could be a caregiver, not just to your children, but to your family. And what happens when those income drops happen? A FISA platform comes into play because you don't pay when you don't earn. And payment is capped. So for Vidhu, the algorithm actually helps them with that the payments are capped for 2 times of what they originally took on. I know different income sharing agreements have a different rate, but that's for Vidhu. So where are we now? So we've had 64 contracts deployed, 174K deployed. We are now, Vidhu is now raising resources to do another tranche of pilot runs. So prototyping smaller within Vidhu's community. We want to take that lessons and want to really deploy it more broadly. And what does broadly mean? The initial resources were 100% grant. We are, at this point in time, between the 2 foundations and the funding gap that Vidhu has, we're looking at part recyclable grants and where possible, probably part recoverable funding as well. And the idea is really to understand how to scale up an income sharing model and how it can be deployed. Objectives, again, expanding the program in terms of the capital allocated, number of contracts deployed, broadening the target audience with beyond the Vidhu's Rising Star community, with beyond young, so looking at young women across Southeast Asia in different education settings and not just those supported by Vidhu. And I think one of the biggest learning point that we are really hedging on for this middle of this growth stage is really to to get an understanding of how different women are going to react to this instrument, how are they going to consume it, how are they going to return it, so that we could get more sophisticated, or Vidhu can get more sophisticated in the way they select the young women who this is applicable for, so that they can serve the young women that this is more applicable for, and they can manage their risk management processes much better, so they can give the funders the confidence to come in and play. There we are. So by 2025, we're looking at 1 million deployed in contracts. That's a 3 years window, 400 plus contracts to be deployed. An average size of a contract would be 2,500. I've covered most of the information on who it will be given, but one difference that Vidhu is playing in this pilot run is to be deploying the contracts to young women who are not just looking for university degrees, but also looking for tertiary education in vocational training, in boot camps, or any other training that gives them access to employability imminently. They will welcome those courses as well. I've covered the funding structure a little bit. The funding that currently Vidhu is raising is $1 million, and it could be restricted recyclable grants or partial recovery of grants. And if you see the potential in young women, and if you see potential in income sharing agreement, Dickson and the other UBS team is here. But if you're interested in Vidhu in general, then I am Raman, and I have my colleague from the other foundation, Mete, there raising her hand. So please do reach out to any one of us. Thank you. Back to the UBS team.
Right. Thank you so much. Fantastic presentation, Raman. So hopefully that gives you all a little bit of context and some examples. And I see we've got some questions on the iPad. So I think what we might do is open up for Q&A. And I'm going to bring in my colleague, Anita, who is zooming in from Zurich, I believe. And this is all part of a collaboration, because we can only build a fund like this when we bring all the right parties to the table. And that's philanthropists pooling resources together, that's getting the best organizations to work together, and really trying to diversify our risk, actually, to try and identify, support, and scale some of these innovations. And we know this works because we've seen it work multiple times before. And Chansen, the example I gave in Africa, only started, I think, 5 years ago. And they've had 2,000 contracts. So we saw from Widow that at 64, and their pathways up to get to maybe that fairly rapidly. And now we're doing 10,000 with Chansen. And I would imagine that if that continues to be successful, within 2-3 years, that will be 100,000. I genuinely think these kinds of models go on a J-curve. So some of the questions that we've had in the room are, maybe Anita, I'll add this one to you first. If we're looking for a kind of diversified approach, we want to find different partners to test and scale and support, what is your selection criteria for implementing partners?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what is interesting in a student financing scheme is that we need implementing partners that master both parts of it. So one part is the financial, right? We need an organization that either has a track record and expertise or is willing to embark on a journey to develop that expertise to manage a loan portfolio. And that doesn't only mean sourcing, it also means ongoing monitoring and management, right? Also means collections, because we want to support models that have the potential to be financially sustainable. So one part is the financial. Now the other part is the understanding of the tertiary education space in the country they operate, understanding the students' needs, understanding the graduates' employment opportunities, and partnering with education organizations, may those be colleges, universities, but also vocational training providers, boot camps. So having that kind of ecosystem of educational partners with which they can actually support students. So what we are looking for is actually this mix of this mix of expertise and track record, or willingness to develop either one of the two, which may be currently a little bit less developed. And this is why actually we insisted in our presentation, the one that Dickson shared, on identifying solutions and basically helping them to supporting them through technical assistance, through investment readiness support, because we understand that these implementing organizations currently are maybe not out there, they are not ready yet.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anita. So there's a couple of questions about the structure and the nature of ISA. Well, I'll attempt to answer these quickly, but please, my colleagues, you can correct me. So one is about are more successful graduates being penalized because they're having to pay back more in an ISA agreement, and does it discourage them for getting a better job? And then the subsequent question on that is, what's the return received for an ISA investment? What should a funder expect? So taking those in order, I think the nature of ISA is it's the absolute polar opposite of being penalized. The benefit of an income share agreement is you pay in relation to how much you're earning. So you can actually pay it off faster if you do better. And you never pay more than what you would have paid if you'd got a market rate loan. So you can't be penalized for working in the system. But the benefit is that it can actually stretch out over time as well, to your point that you made earlier, Raman, that if you have career breaks or you need to have more patience in terms of how you're paying, it can adapt for that as well. But on average, again, looking at a portfolio of maybe 10,000 students who are repaying their income share agreements over a period of time, what you tend to see is some are repaying early, so you can recycle the capital faster. Some are taking a lot longer. I think broadly on average what we've seen in Africa with the likes of Chansen is repayments happening between 3 to 10 years, 10 being the long side of the equation, 3 being the fastest. And on average, again, operating track record is still fairly early. We're looking at about a 9% average IRR, return on investment. Now, what we should say is certainly for the Asia Education Fund, Higher Education Fund, this is philanthropic capital to start with. So this is not an investment. This is capital that's going to be put into instruments like grants that maybe convert to equity or program-related investments, but it's still recycling at a level of return that means the capital's growing, which we think is completely different from the old paradigm of giving money away and that being gone and you're having to do it again year after year, year after year. So I think maybe actually I'll bring you in on this one, Raman. There's a couple of questions about the nature of the mentorship scheme and how do you implement that? And then actually after the students have repaid their finance, do they get involved in mentoring other ISA recipients?
Am I audible enough for everyone? Probably take that. So the way it worked in Vidhu, it was the other way around. They are first and foremost a women mentorship leadership program. And they realized that their young women needed access to finance. And then they decided to roll out an income sharing agreement within their cohorts. What they are going to do if they continued with the income sharing agreement for a larger cohort of young women sourced from all over Southeast Asia from different IHLs, they're hoping to still continue the part which they are quite an expert on, which is the career advisory part. And mentorship to get them into, so young women who join the income sharing agreement through Vidhu, if they want to be part of a Rising Star program, they'll be welcome to do so, but not the full-fledged mentorship would be offered to all income sharing agreement receivers, if you like. I mean, they're looking for really large scale. One of the flip side of intensive mentorship is that you are only as good as the source or the pipeline of mentors that you can source. So I think career advisory they can house in-house, and they're going to extend that offer, but mentorship only if they come back and join the mentorship program.
So last question that's come on the iPad is, what is the role of UBS in this? Do you reinvest the funds and manage the returns? Again, I'll start with this, and Dickson maybe can add any domestic Singapore context. But essentially, part of what we feel our role is at UBS is to offer the structures that can help facilitate this, and also facilitate the pooling of capital. So the UBS Optimus Foundation Singapore would be the recipient, so it would be a grant to that entity, which will be matched 20%. That capital will be pooled and then invested into these portfolio of partners. Some of it will be grant-based. Some of it, hopefully, the majority will be recyclable. And the way that tends to work in all of our previous instruments is if say, a philanthropist puts $1 million into the fund, At the end of the life cycle of the fund, hopefully that's now worth 1.5, and we say to you, what would you like to do with that money now? So we work with philanthropists to then hopefully redeploy and recycle, and by that stage, hopefully we're at 1 million students going into these kinds of instruments. I don't know, Dickson, if you want to add any other context from a Singapore perspective.
Yeah, just one, a bit more. Nothing stops us from taking a portion of that fund and make it catalytic. So it raises private capital. That's the key. And if it goes 5x from there, then why not? And that's itself is already scalable. Yeah.
We have 1 minute for questions in the room, so yes, please.
If UBS is managing the fund, is there any fee from UBS to manage the fund?
No fee at all. In fact, we put 20% of our own money in as well. And if the elephant in the room is why on earth does a bank do this, I'll be totally honest. We think that if we help develop products and services that change the world, we'll increase our market share and more people will work with us.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just add, sorry, I'm not wearing a wearable mic, so I have to come back to the rostrum. I just wanted to add that, I'm sure folks in the room are thinking, what are the different ways you could deploy your capital into an income sharing agreement? Of course, a philanthropic funder can come in the way we have with Sidhu. So we are looking at it from a recyclable grant. So any contribution that comes in is going to just get recycled back into the program, and there's a ladder going back to another young woman. And then we have another partner with us, another foundation who's partnered on this, and they are looking at it more as a recoverable contribution at a time when it doesn't jeopardize the program. So those returns, assuming we don't raise any more than $1 million, then in the 7th year, they could recoup some of the capital. So you can go in and really look at the financial model and really identify you want to do partial of what. You could do recoverable, you could do recyclable, or you could do just philanthropic and do the operating costs, because organizations need that operating cost, and that could be a valuable philanthropic capital to come in to contribute to that. So I just wanted to add that different.
No, absolutely. Fantastic. We're out of time, sadly, and I think we're handing over to the next education call to action. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tom, Dickson, Raman, and Anita. Now, for those who are keen to support the CTA, the one that has just been presented by UBS, do scan the CTA QR code to indicate your interest. You have that on your table, and we have it here as well on screen, so just simply scan, and you can find out more details about the call to action, and you can submit your interest there as well. So for the next session now, we have the team from Tanoto Foundation. So they'll be sharing their call to action titled Unlocking Potential, Early Years Childhood Development. And we would like to welcome Michael Susanto and Eddy Henry. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusma. So before I begin, I would like to show you a video, 1-minute video about Tanoto Foundation. Can you please play the video? Thank you. So that is a video about Indonesia, but we actually operate in Singapore, China, and soon to be Brazil. So as I shared with you in the main session before, I cannot tell you more and more even how important early years is. Because as I'm also a father of 2 sons, 5 and 7, and it's been a challenging for me as a parent to actually educate my kids. Now, I've had the opportunity to visit the centers, which we call Rumah Anak Sigap in Indonesia. And I can feel like around the world, actually there's a need for parents to really practice good parenting practices. And not just for the benefit of the parents, but also for the benefit, mainly actually for the child. So I really want to encourage you. So we don't actually have a presentation again today, but it is all on backup. If it's need be, we will show any data, any presentation that you like. But we would like to have you all to ask questions about early years, because we really want, at the end of the day, what we want is to raise awareness of the importance of early years investment, because we don't have enough people and organizations that look into this space and actually doing investments. And now, Tanoto Foundation, since 2017, we actually decided that we want to get into this space where no one or very limited organizations actually does anything in 0 to 3, especially the first 1,000 days. So what we did was in Indonesia and in China, we piloted. In Indonesia, we had 23 centers, and in China, we have 39 centers. So I have actually, Eddy is our head of early child education and development. So we are here, the both of us, to answer any questions that you would like. And Eddy, if you want to add anything to explain your center.
Thank you.
Please.
I'm Eddy. I'm the head of the early childhood education and development in Indonesia. Back in 2017, we did a study on where we should invest in early childhood. And it was right away apparent that the investment in for children from 0 to 3 is extremely minimum. And even if there were investment, it was fragmented, and there were all organizations or from government programs. They were focusing on health only, nutrition only, or education only. But we know that children of age 0 to 3, they require a more comprehensive, holistic intervention. The parents, especially first-time parents, need help in how to make sure that children can develop on track and optimally according to the age. So we decided that our investment will have a much better return if we start from very young. And this is how we can contribute most. And I'm very happy to share that since 2019, when we started the journey of investing in 0 to 3, when we got all the modules developed and we collaborated with the local universities, experts, and we set up 23 models, 23 centers, parenting and early stimulation centers in Indonesia. And these become the seeds where we can have an evidence, a model that we can then use that to leverage our advocacy work to the district level government as well as the national government. And this model also is implemented in China, and we hope that we can convince you that this model can also be implemented elsewhere in the region. And with your help, then we can actually impact more children for their optimal development. Thank you.
So one of the approach is that from the very start, we need to get the government in and really co-own our programs, right? So for example, in China, actually, today, the government is adopting and scaling up to a foundation that is actually behind it is the government of China. So, I mean, around the world, we have so many programs. Actually, we are actually doing a landscaping study with our friend over here, Mary, from Center of Evidence and Implementation. And we look at, just to give you some example, in Singapore, the study shows that there's a lot of programs in Singapore, but then not all of the people, the mothers that actually need them, actually access. So availability of programs doesn't mean access. Now, in Indonesia and China, limited, very small numbers of models actually is available. When it is available, it is, like Eddy said, is separated from the government, private companies doing it very small scale, it's not scalable, it's very expensive. And so to start with the government and to end well, not to end, to reach a point where the government actually scaled up is what is our idea. So pausing there, we would really like to welcome any questions from the audience, whether from the, okay. Yeah. So we have our, do you want to?
There's a question from.
Oh, Raman, please.
Hi, Michael and Eddy. Thank you so much for the presentation. What are the different interventions in Indonesia around early years? What type of interventions could one give into? And are there sufficient program providers for such interventions?
Right, very good question, Raman. Oh, okay.
You can.
So it's, as Michael, during his earlier presentation this morning, mentioned that there's no one size fits all. There's no one solution that fits all. Even in a country, we see, especially in Indonesia, when there's so diverse demography and socioeconomic differences as well. So we see that each area, each locality may have different issues that they want to address. For example, in Indonesia, the stunting prevalence is still very high. 3 in 10 children under 5 is suffering from stunting. So we use this parenting early center as well to address that issue. And this is very much in line with the WHO nurturing care framework, that we address the needs for the health, nutrition, safety and security, and then responsive caregiving, and then early opportunity for learning. That would be provide the holistic picture. So, and well, in another area, we have where they are more, let's say, urban, and stunting is no longer an issue. But then again, the issue would be stimulating the children from very, very early years. That's to promote the development of the motoric skills, linguistic, cognitive skills. So we see that different areas that we need to do a proper comprehensive assessment first in order to make sure that our intervention would be very targeted and relevant to their needs. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And to add to that, before the next question is, there are available models in early childhood development. I mean, there are a lot of programs already, but most of them actually target 4 to 6, which is in most countries in the region are compulsory education, and it's schooling only. Right. But actually the need of early years actually is before that. And it is actually, in terms of investment, in terms of brain development, it actually the most happens in 0 to 3. Yeah. Second question, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Cheryl Fafaria from UBS, and thank you so much for all of the work that you do. We really appreciate it. I'm a huge believer in ECD as well, and I suppose one of the gaps sometimes in other funders coming through and realizing the full potential of early childhood development and in their funding strategies has been traditionally sort of the impact measurement side of things, because how can you prove that the investment, in say a 0 to 3-year-old is really actually activating somebody right at the end of their kind of school year's career or whatever it is, and how do you evidence that impact, because there are so many other factors involved as well. So we all know that it works, but how do we cross that bridge? How do we cross that barrier sometimes that stops people from investing in early childhood development?
Right, very good question. One of the things that we encountered in Indonesia, that there's a lack of instrument to measure children's development, both at individual level as well as population level. So 2 years ago, we worked with UNICEF. Is Michael here? Michael there. So we gave a grant to UNICEF to translate and adopt a population level early childhood measurement, development measurement instrument called curated. And also ECDI. So both instruments we use at the population level, and this is what we use to show an impact on a larger scale. And obviously, this is in line as well with the fulfilling the voluntary report for Indonesia for the SDG 4.2.1. Now, however, in order to make that impact be meaningful at the immediate level, at the grassroots level, we need an individual level measurement, and we are currently working with the university in Indonesia to translate in another individual level child development measurement instrument called ASQ. So we see that the impact is not only just at the high level, but it also has to be at the grassroots level where it matters most. Any sign, early detection of development impediment should allow the frontline workers, the cadres, to trigger an immediate intervention or referral to healthcare workers.
And to that frame, if you have I think the organization is sending the more complete, comprehensive document of the call to action. In that document, actually, it presents to you the journey that we actually did, right? And it really begins not with, okay, let's just build and renovate a center and then bring parents in. No, the journey began much earlier than that. We needed to, like Eddy said, translate and actually provide measurement tools for in-country, contextualize, localize. And then we need to develop the parenting modules that is applicable to that country. So we cannot just bring WHO globally evidence-based framework and then just apply it to that country immediately. We need to localize and we need to contextualize. So we actually did the pilot 2-3 years, and now the call to action is, if you are interested, if you're passionate about this space, let's do it. Let's do it together. We will collaborate. We will share our learning journey, and we will explore partnership, to provide technical assistance, to connect with the experts, with the regional best practice sharing, like-minded organizations, to really jump in the same boat, and collaborate with you. We just talked with somebody from the Philippines. It's very different context. So this organization will embark on the same journey as us. In Malaysia also, very different context. They will also embark on the same journey as we did. But so it is not a one-year program. No, it will be a long game. It will be a clear commitment from the very start. So that's the call to action.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think the question is very important. We use impact as also a language to communicate to different parties. For the government, if we talk about process, programs, and sometimes we got tied into the particular agenda or interest. But when we talk about the impact and the data, that everybody sort of like, oh yeah, there's a common language, they can understand that, and they use that as a basis then to decide how to effectively allocate the resources, be it financial resources or their human resources. So again, this impact is extremely important, and we include that all the way from the conception of our programs and all the way to the monitoring of the progress of the program and evaluating the endline. So thank you for the question.
So we have a few questions from the audience. So let me pick one. Should I just press? Oh, should I say it? Okay. So I'm interested to know more about your contextualization process. How do you work with local partners to make this happen?
Right. Okay. There are several ways to do so. I'll share my experience in Indonesia. Perhaps Michael can add here. So in Indonesia, parenting is we understand that it's tied into the culture and tradition and how the children are being raised in that locality. We understand that ethno-parenting plays a very crucial role in not just in terms of how the children are being developed, but also how they believe the norms of disciplining children, for example. Whether a certain disciplinary action for the children is considered to be on the border of being abusive or on the border of being just. So when we had a focus group discussion with the parents, the community, and identify what would be the issues. We use the measurement tool to see what would be the areas that needs to be developed, which domain of development that is currently being underserved. And then we discussed with the local community leaders as well as the religious leaders to make sure that we also accommodate their input and their interest into our program. So it took a while for us to set up programs in each area, but we want to make sure that all these insights, input, and feedback that we receive from the local community is accommodated in our program design.
Yeah. And just to add, because COVID happened, And in Indonesia, the experience of we wanted to open the centers 2 years earlier, and then we cannot open. So instead, we did not stop delivering the services. We still deliver the services, but then we needed to go online and hybrid. But then we got an idea, right? So this is an opportunity for us to actually test out whether a center-based, a hybrid-based, or a purely home visit-based, or a combination of those, which are most effective. So we did that. So that's also part of the contextualization process. If there's changes, there's shift in the space, we need to be agile enough and also integrate that into our program approach. We also have Pasatrio here. No, you don't want to explain from China, okay. So let's go to the next question is how do you evaluate your intervention and what range of metrics do you use? So let me just show the graph from the presentation, if you can, please. My friend from behind the stage. Yeah, back to the matrix. So 2 parts. We measure the children and also the parenting. Parenting in terms of parenting skills improvement. So how, we learned from KKH yesterday, parenting self-efficacy. How good are you in parenting? So do you know the importance of playing with the baby? No. Not all parents actually knows that it is important, unfortunately, right? Know how, and then important, and then do you know how to play with the baby? So in the centers actually, the facilitators actually demonstrate how do you actually play with the baby? How do you actually read? How do you introduce literacy and numbers to the baby? Because as a parent myself, I didn't know how to do that. So this is very relevant problem. That's why we needed to show and demonstrate the parents so they can eventually do it. In the video that I will show you at the end of our presentation, parents actually say, now I know. And then that parent actually voluntarily, without us asking, she actually teach other parents, became like quote unquote agents of change in the community to teach other parents about good parenting practices because he first knew. And from the children development score, obviously, communication, gross motoric, fine motoric, and problem solving. So not all children immediately can interact with other children around his surrounding. In the center, we actually, and you can see in the video later, we actually stimulate or actually do a live session of children interacting with each other. So, and children in the rural area, sometimes they don't actually get those interactions with children his age level. So by doing that in the center, it actually provides opportunities for children to experience those experiences that they actually don't get at home.
Right. So we measure at 3 levels. One is the impact level. Then we measure the development of each of the domains. On the outcome level, we measure the behavior change of the parents at home. So we use another measurement set for that, home. And then at the output level, we measure, and this is something that we use almost on the day-to-day basis. So we measure the number of interactions, visits from the parents or caregivers to the center. Our data shows that to be more on the effective side, the parents or caregivers need to have 4 visits, at minimum 4 visits per month, ideally 8. And so we devise our program based on that as well. And also and on the reverse side is how many the facilitators, how many children or how many diets are parent and children that they serve within a month. So that becomes our main indicators to see whether there's interaction and contacts being quality interaction being made, and whether that translates into a change in behaviors of parenting practices at home, as well as then the final impact is there, whether the children are developing on track. Yeah.
So we have a lot of questions actually. So let me choose one. How do you overcome the challenges of working with policymakers to scale your interventions?
Wow. Right. So again, because at first we understand that with our limited resources, we will not be able to do on a large scale and help all the communities that needs the help. And then the government has much more resources. But our role is to show models that work, that can be adopted. So from the early on, we involve the governments to participate in the design concept, in the discussion, and also in ensuring they also partake in the monitoring and evaluation of the program for the entire duration. And not only just from the government, but also from the community, because community in Indonesia, for example, there's a village fund that can be used to also pay for the facilitators, and also by involving the community, we hope that one day that the community also willing to chip into the program and to ensure the sustainability of the center in the future. So we involve the governments at the village level and sub-district level, and then use that as a model then to do advocacy on the provincial level, and then later on to the national level. So advocacy for us is we start from very early on. It doesn't start at the end of the program, but always from the beginning we involve them, and we already tell them our intention, what we want to do at the end of the day, and this is hopefully, even with the change of the administration, then we hope that our programs can also sustain and continue on.
And in all of our centers, we actually did not buy a land and build a new building. No, we actually tap into and enhance existing infrastructure that the government already have. So that in a way actually enhance and add value to the services that the government actually offer to the community.
Right.
Which they like, right?
And Minister Budi earlier this morning mentioned about the Posyandu, which is the frontline health workers. Most of our centers actually built at the post Posyandu, the village health post. So we use that facility and renovate. And again, we invite the cadres, the healthcare workers, cadres, and we train them. So they're already part of the system, they're already there, and we do not bring in facilitators from outside, but we try to develop and grow the talent or the facilitators from within the village, the community.
So the next one is a very interesting question. And how do you ensure that children continue to be properly cared for after they turn 4 and transition out of the target age group of your care?
Yeah, so we ideally that all the parents that are participating in the center can go through the whole 3-year cycle, and we believe that it will probably take that long to ensure that they understand or it becomes a habit for them to understand the needs of the children's development goals. So we, with the 3 years of hoping that it will change the behaviors and they carry on, but our intervention for 3 years is actually extended to 5 years in certain areas, because the stunting prevalence, for example, is measured up to 5 years. Yeah? And then continue on to the become school readiness. We have another program for 3 to 6, but then again is a subsidiary program. But our main focus is 0 to 3. Set up the foundation right, get it to become a habit, and change the behaviors of the parents, the primary caregivers, and then hopefully you can continue on.
Give you a story about a madam called Annie from Pandeglang. It's about 1.5 hours drive, rural areas from Jakarta. So she is one of our cadres. So voluntarily, after doing our parenting modules, he voluntarily, because in that village there are seven posyandus, but we only pick one posyandu that we renovate to become rumah anak sigap. So voluntarily, because she said that it is so important, She voluntarily go around all the other 6 posyandu and literally teach the other 5 cadres in those posyandu and disseminate the information by herself without us knowing. But it is a good example. Right? And another story is one of the cater, because it's so important, she would travel by motorcycle and bring a parent 1 hour away because the house of the parents is inside the forest. Mind you, it's a rural area. And she would drive the mother to the center and then do the service for 1 hour and then drive her back every single week. And that changes the community that it's an extension of the community. And the parents become like, hey, why don't you have a shadow rumah anak sigap in my forest, for the lack of better words. Yeah. So the next and I guess final question is, okay, how do you ensure the essence of holistic approach is preserved across all your early childhood centers?
So how does?
How do you make sure it's the same all across the centers, or replicable, or standardized?
So one of the things that we started early on, we have to make a standard module, and this standard module is being evaluated on regular basis, and based on the feedback that we receive as well during the implementation. So this standard module is being shared. Now, when we deliver this module to the facilitators, we also tap into a mentor teachers, mentor trainers, and these are at more on the district level. So these mentor trainers will continue on to accompany or provide mentoring to the facilitators to ensure that their capacity is also being continuously developed. And we also provide a counseling facilitation skills training, so to ensure that all the facilitators can continue on to provide the right counseling services for the children.
So thank you so much for being here with us and paying attention and asking your questions. Thank you so much. We will still be here for the second sessions, and we will be here. And actually, we have an office here in Singapore. If you are stationed here in Singapore, later on, Fanny in Singapore will be in Singapore, and we are all available to answer your questions. So I just want to close by showing you a video from a rural village in China where our center is. Can you please play the video? Thank you.
The 0 to 3 years of life are a critical period for a child's brain development and for investment in human capital. Tanoto Foundation works closely with governments and like-minded partners to implement the HOPE program for early childhood development. Building over 40 early childhood education and development centers for the benefit of 1,700 infants and their families.
中心刚开业的时候，孩子们普遍的都是有的很调皮捣蛋呀，有的很腼腆呀，害羞不说话。那经过我们中心一段时间的培训呢，孩子可能在语言、认知、社会情感跟他的运动方面都有了很大的改善。
Thanks to HOPE's trainers, there are now more parents who are better equipped to raise their children. The beneficiaries of HOPE will one day be the drivers of positive changes in parenting and caregiving in rural China. Tanoto Foundation firmly believes that quality education accelerates equal opportunity, helping to build the nation's next generation of leaders who will help us to realize our sustainable development goals.
With that, again, thank you so much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.